Good evening. We'll call the public input meeting to discuss the proposed 2019 county budget and levy to order. I'm Jack Kolars, the chair of the county board this year. I want to welcome you to this meeting. Before beginning, I'd like those people from the county who are attending tonight's meeting to introduce themselves. So we'll start with Administrator Crush.
Ryan Crush, Nicollet County Administrator.
James Stenson, Nicollet County Commissioner.
Marie Drennel, Nicollet County Commissioner.
Denny Kemp, Nicollet County Commissioner.
John Lipke, Nicollet County Commissioner.
Heather McCormick, Finance Director.
All right, thank you. Do we want to hear from our assessors, or do you just want to sit and wait? Okay. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to provide an overview of the proposed Nicollet County budget and tax levy for the year 2019. We wish to stress that the purpose of tonight's meeting is to provide an overview of that proposed budget and levy for the year 2019 and to provide you with an opportunity to give the county board your input regarding these proposals. I want to also repeat that the purpose of tonight's meeting is not to discuss individual property tax valuations. If you have concerns or questions regarding property valuations, we would ask that you make arrangements to discuss these with our Nicollet County Assessor's Office. In addition, if you have questions or comments tonight, we'd ask that you hold on to them until after all of the county speakers have finished with their presentations. After that, we'll be happy to take and answer questions that you might have. So with that introduction, I'd like to ask our County Administrator, Ryan Crush, to provide us with an overview of the proposed budget.
Sure,
Ryan?
I can do that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder, Mr. Chair, should we ask our guests what they're interested in, if they're here for assessed value purposes, or if they do want to hear a budget presentation?
Yes, that would be a good question. What are, I'm sorry?
Same here.
Hear everything?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. That sounds good. We have thicker packets up here that we're looking at. All that information will be on the screen. There was some smaller packets with a summary that I believe you have in your hands. So if you don't have it in your packet, it'll be up on the screen. What I will do is start looking at our packets here on the county budget overview. The first slide there is our budget history. You can see that what I show here is from 2010 to 2019. Our trend line for how our budget has changed. It has gradually gone up. You see a spike there in 2014 and 2015. That's as a result of the Health and Human Service Building construction occurring, and then we also did a compensation study that added a significant amount of funds to our overall payroll. So that's why the spike occurred there. It's primarily the Human Service Building, because you can see it came back down in 2016 again. So we're now at a total budget of just under $43 million. And if there's questions, just feel free to stop me as I go along here. Next page then is our Nicollet County budget statement. This will be what you'll see printed in our newspapers, I believe, first of the year, Heather, somewhere around that time frame. It shows a summary of our overall budget. I will highlight on the right-hand side on the percentage change. We're showing a 3.79% tax levy increase. On the revenue side, I will also note under other sources, our budgeted use of fund balance is up significantly, which has led to a growth in our overall budget. We discussed that in our budget workshops this summer and fall. And if you recall, a good share of that is attributed to using reserves for our new parking lot across the street, adding office space in our human service building. We're using fund balance also for some technology items. And then on the restricted fund balance side, we're budgeting $350,000 of, I believe, wheelage tax dollars for consultant contracts for the County Road 12 flooding that we're working on right now. And then we estimated an additional $350,000 of bond funds to finish off the sheriff's project. So overall, we're showing a 7.1% increase in our total budget, but a significant portion of that, actually about 3.5% of that, is actually increased in reserve spending. So the overall budget isn't up the full 7% as it would appear. On the expenditure side, you'll notice that under general public, that's basically the general fund, that's up 15%, and that's largely attributed to the expenses I mentioned for reserve spending, our capital projects. And then in road and bridge, we have almost a 10% increase, and again, that's mainly due to the increase in reserve spending we're doing there, and then we also have an uptick in our state aid for road construction next year. Any questions with that overall summary? Next page then looks at our significant budget items for 2019. I will highlight on the expenditure side, we had a large increase in our overall technology needs. So we increased the levy $205,000 for technology needs. Wages and staffing was a little over $800,000. 52% of our total budget is payroll and benefits. We're also adding 4 new staff in health and human services, which also is in that $800,000 number. And then again, I mentioned briefly on the previous slides the use of our unrestricted cash reserves, and that's the list that we have. Good news on the sit-stand workstations. We were estimating that cost being $75,000. And we did have about 100 staff that said they would like to have one. We went out and got additional bids, and we actually found a vendor to provide them for about, well, not quite half, about $45,000. So we're going to save a good chunk of money on what that initial cost was. Next page is pie charts of our budgeted revenue. And what I did is I took a went back to 2009 on the top pie chart, and the bottom one is 2019. Taxes now account for 7% more of our revenue than they did 10 years ago. So that means our other sources of revenue have decreased. Intergovernmental funds is, I believe, and Heather, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's mainly our state and federal funds that we get. That actually has stayed relatively flat. So that was an interesting summary there, but the tax portion of our overall revenue has increased now to 60%. Next slide on the expenditure side. Again, shows 2009 to 2019. Actually, the expenses per category are very similar. You'll notice that health and human services are almost identical as a percentage of our total budget. Road and bridge is very similar, actually down a little bit. General government's up a little bit, and public safety is very, very similar. So we haven't had a huge fluctuation as far as change in the overall piece of the pie of total expenditures for the budget. Okay, the next part, I'll go into our property tax overview. Our 10-year levy history shows that our average levy increase is 4.52%. The next slide then shows what our levy is proposed for 2019. You can see there that the budget includes a 3.79% levy increase, so about 0.75% below our 10-year average. I will highlight On the right-hand column, you see about a 10% increase in library. Of course, the board, by consensus, has agreed to add additional $10,000 for library funding. Road and bridge is up 8.16%. A big part of that is we did a market study follow-up in 2017, and a lot of our road and bridge job classifications we found were low, so we had to move several up. So a good portion of that is attributed to salary increase. And you'll see now that for every it takes about $211,000 to equal 1% of a levy increase. The next couple pages is our tax levy by department or program area. I won't go through these in detail. On the right-hand column is the net, and the net equals what the tax levy is for that specific area. So a positive number means that that's how much property tax levy is used to fund that program. If it's a negative number, that means that department uses no tax levy and actually produces a revenue. I'll highlight the revenue departments in red. Under professional services and the state audit, you can see that generates quite a bit of revenue. What that is our federal reimbursement that we get primarily for health and human services. So that money goes into that department. The $562,000 under other general government is primarily interest income, county program aid, delinquent taxes, or tax levy, those types of things. And under our North Mankato office building and health and human service building, they both show positives. Of course, that's basically in and out money because the expense is on the revenue fund side. We charge rent for human services because then we can collect reimbursement, which shows up in the professional services and A87 audit. And we are generating actually now too an additional $50,000 a year from DHS for renting space next door. I won't spend any more time on those unless you had a specific question. Again, it's just kind of to show a snapshot of how much tax levy it takes to fund each of these programs. The last page there is our human services. We have that in two categories. Income maintenance is our financial assistance programs and child support. So it takes a little over $1 million of levy to administer those programs. And on the social service side, that includes child protection, children's mental health, and adult mental health. So that takes about $4.2 million of tax levy to administer. Okay, I will flip to the tax examples that Jackie puts together for us each year. I'll start out by noting that the total taxable market value for the county went up 4.51%, or a difference of about $184 million. Of that $184 million, about $33 million was actually new improvements, or 18% of the total. Let's see. The next category is down where it talks about the percentage of levy by ag, non-ag, and personal property. Let's skip that section because the next slide on the next page will explain that better. On the very bottom is the examples that Jackie ran. So for example, under the proposed levy, a $150,000 house with no value change would have a $13 reduction in county taxes. A homestead with a 5% increase would have a $31 increase in county property taxes. Commercial industrial property with a 6% increase would have $229 increase in county taxes. And then a house garage of 1 acre, with 80 acres of total tillable lands would have a $41 increase. The house portion would go up slightly and the ag portion would go down slightly. Going to the next page then, so who pays what portion of the total tax levy? You can see here that residential accounts for 52% of the proposed tax levy. As you know, depending on where you live in certain communities, housing values did go up significantly. We're seeing a shift towards residential property picking up a bigger share of the tax burden, as ag values have basically stayed flat the last 2 years. I will note that the 52% of residential does include ag homesteads with the house garage of 1 acre, because that essentially is, I consider residential anyways. Then you see there that the ag portion is about a third of the total tax bill, and then commercial and industrial is 14%. The next graph is a graph and a trend line of our total estimated market value. You want to see this value increasing at a steady clip, as the higher that grows each year, the more growth there is that helps absorb the overall tax burden. With that said, usually the majority of that is just an increase in valuations, but there is always some new additional growth in there as well. You can see there how we fluctuated over the last 10 years. In 2010 we were just over $3 billion, and then now in 2019 we're at $4.26 billion in total value, with a trend line increase showing about a 5% increase in growth each year. So for 2019 we had 4.51%, so that's really a very average year over the last 10 years. You see there in 2015 we hit $4 billion for the first time, and that of course is attributed to when ag land values spiked up at that point. The overall value went up significantly in the county. Next page then is our property rates, our property tax rate trend. You usually like to see either a decline or a slow increase in this over time. That basically, it's basically an equation of our ratio of estimated market value to our overall tax levy. You can see there that for 2019 our overall tax rate did go down about 0.5% to 54.65, and our overall trend line is under 0.5% per year. So basically what this shows is our tax rate is growing at a much smaller percentage than our overall estimated market value, which is what we want to try to accomplish. I'll jump then to some additional information that Jackie and her staff put together each year. This is our taxable market values by taxing jurisdiction in the county. If you want to look at the middle column there where it says taxable market value, you can see what share of each of those jurisdictions makes up the $4.2 billion total value for the county. The highest valued city is North Mankato at about $1.1 billion. The highest valued township is Lake Prairie at $293 million, and of course the smallest is the city of Mankato, but that's only a few parcels that we have.
Probably 30 acres.
The next page
Ryan,
then.
could you just,
Oh, sure.
just on, while we're still talking about that, can we highlight the TIF component there so people understand where that slides out?
Yeah, I'm looking to my back row people that deal with TIF, but so TIF is basically when a city is typically the cities put new growth into a tax increment finance district. The improvement in the value is captured over a certain number of years, and is not added to the tax capacity until 10, 15, 20 years down the road. So the TIF tax capacity then, is that the total value, Jackie?
That comes out of, I gotta look at that, the TIF tax capacity, yeah. So
Okay.
that comes out of the tax capacity, so the county's not receiving any dollars on that tax capacity that we're retaining for that TIF.
So yeah, that.
So that comes away from the taxable market value.
Right.
Correct, so we
So-
subtract that when we figure out rates, so we take the TIF out and then
I just wanted to make
eventually-
sure I understood
Yeah.
that correctly, thank you.
Yep.
So the goal as TIF, as an economic development tool, is that when those sunset, that value then comes in and helps spread the tax burden at that time, so.
Is that related to Job Z at all, or similar?
Very different, yep, very different. I don't think we have any Job Z,
Job Z expired.
and that's expired now, yeah. Next page is our tax rates by jurisdiction. You'll see there that, the first column is the county, rate, and our rate is the same for just about everybody except a few of the cities, and I'm assuming that's probably related to TIF, maybe?
No, that's, the library fund.
Oh, okay, that's how we spread the library levy. You can see it's a very small impact. Then Region 9 and the HRA, that's the overall rate that's applied to everybody's taxes in the county. Then if you go to the column that says city and town, you can see the rates there by jurisdiction. The highest rate for any city is the city of Lafayette at 65. And the highest rate for any township is Belgrade at 15.6. On the school side, this has actually a pretty significant impact on the overall tax rates by jurisdictions. You'll see we've got a lot of new schools, so obviously those rates have ticked up a little bit. St. Peter's School District and all those jurisdictions in it, the townships, all have the highest tax rate for their school portion of the levy. And then you can see there on the total tax rate, when you add all those together, this tax rate is what's applied to your property tax classification and your property value to determine what your taxes are. And I'm saying that probably somewhat incorrectly, but they're kind of nodding in the back row, so.
Something's wrong with Lafayette. These two.
So you can see there that the overall,
They
the
have to be the
jurisdiction with
same.
the overall highest tax rate in the county is the city of St. Peter.
Oh, I see.
And again, part of that
This
is the
wrong
school.
part? Got a lot lower rate.
And it looks like Oshawa Township is the highest, highest tax rate of any townships. And again, that's, I'm assuming, school, largely
Looks like
attributed
it's
to.
broken out that way.
Next page then shows the tax levy by jurisdiction from 2018 to 2019, and then the percent change. You can see there under the townships that Bernadotte had a 11% increase. Now, this is where percentages can be a little deceiving because they went from $90,000 to $100,000. So not a huge dollar amount, but percentage-wise, it shows up. Down to the cities, Lafayette had a almost a 43% levy increase. So I don't know what they're doing in
I think
Lafayette.
it's a bonding that they haven't done before.
Did they bond for some like sewer and water
I
projects?
believe so.
Okay.
Don't they have to help pay for that fiber optic thing that's losing money too? Are
That-
they one of
that-
the cities in that?
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
It's a big,
They added additional funds on their end for some
Well,
debt
weren't
that
they were also doing their municipal building issues, weren't they? That's right.
I think it's more the sewer and water.
You'll notice too that both North Mankato and St. Peter are in double-digit levy increases as well. Some of those may tick down a little bit here before the end of the year, but that gives you a snapshot of each jurisdiction then. And then the last sections are for your reading pleasure when you're having trouble sleeping. You can learn about how our property tax system works, how the assessment process works, what property tax classifications are, what all these terms mean, and 14 reasons why property taxes vary from year to year. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chair.
Does that conclude your report?
It does.
We'll open the meeting now to comments, input from the public, after which time we will adjourn the meeting. So those who are here from the public, would you like to make a comment to our public input meeting here this evening? If so, I'd ask you to please come forward, have a seat, state your name and address, and you can address the board at that time.
It's a lot of data.
Which jurisdiction do you live in, sir? Where do you live?
I live in Belgrade Township.
In Belgrade? Okay.
Right.
Me too.
Okay, sure.
And our assessments just, or our valuation just skyrocketed. But we think it's probably because of the castle that was built right across the road. Now, how can that make our house so much more valuable? Is my question.
Well, the young lady sitting next to you can explain probably that in great detail. I will note though that Belgrade did have, oh, actually Belgrade's levy was 0, so their levy didn't go up, so all of your tax increase would then be attributed to valuation change, the 0% levy increase. Right?
Well, perhaps. But
Perhaps.
On the township part.
In
On the township part.
In that specific line
Right,
item.
on the township part, right.
But not the school and that.
And the county would go up slightly.
And you know, we have had that question about the house that was built in Belgrade. It's a very large, lovely home, and actually, it didn't increase your property value directly. What will impact your property values are what other properties have sold for. So that's what will cause a market value adjustment, either up or down. It will depend on what other properties have sold for compared to the assessed value.
So if we want to review that, that would not be this meeting, that would be going
Correct.
to see who?
And that'll be in the spring. You get a notice of value in late March, early April. And Belgrade Township holds a local board of appeal and equalization meeting, and the time and the date on that will be specified on your notice. But when you get that notice, certainly give the assessor's office a call. Our phone number is there, and we can answer a lot of questions for you, supply you with sales information, and sometimes we can handle it that way before you need to attend the local meeting. Thank you. Sure.
Any other comments that you'd like to address the board with this evening? And again, you're welcome to visit with our assessor afterwards. But if you have any other comments, we're certainly welcoming them at this point.
I guess I have one other question.
Sir, if you could come forward
Sure.
so we could hear you.
Sure.
I'm having a hard time hearing. My
Okay.
wife tells me that all the time.
I know the story.
Your name and address?
Les Altenberg, 38158 Honeysuckle Lane.
Yes, Les.
That's in Belgrade Township. Under the general, public expenditures went up 15%. Is there a more detailed breakdown that's available?
Do you have that in your packet, Ryan?
I don't have that specifically, other than, let me look here. So we're showing a $1.4 million total increase in expenditures.
Right.
And I'm just looking here,
I think 1.2 is the use of the fund balance.
yeah, 1.2 million would be use of county reserves to do capital improvement projects. So a very small portion of that is actually a tax levy increase. And that happens from time to time when we have building projects or road projects. You see spikes like that.
Any idea what that was last year? 2017 versus 18?
I didn't bring my book, but I could certainly find that out for you. you have your book from
Well,
last year?
that same sheet, that 2018 adopted budget, in the revenue section, so the budgeted use of unrestricted and then the budgeted use of restricted. I think that's what we're looking for. The comparison on that, it was like 65,000 and then 106,600.
Yeah, I think he's interested in what it was from 17 to 18.
Right.
Percentage
Okay.
increase.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't have my.
I don't think it was much of a change. I know
Yeah.
that gets a little confusing because the revenue part is on those lines and then the expense part is on that general public line, so it is a little confusing because it's not really 15%.
Can we make a
Of
note to make
expenses.
sure that Mr. Altenberg gets a copy of that information
Yeah.
That would be great, thank
from the
you.
year before?
I'm also curious what, I saw that some of the charts they show from 2009 to 2019. What's the population of the county done at that, during those years?
It's went up. The estimate now is about 34,000. I don't know what we were at in 2009, but we've definitely increased.
I would guess that it would have been under 30,000, a shade under 30,000, but I'm just recalling that from memory.
I think you're pretty close, Jack.
But yeah, that sounds
So it would
correct.
be 4,000 people additional, but that, we might have to check our figures on that, Les.
Okay. All right, very good, thank you.
Thank you for your appearance here tonight. As we're talking about the whole budget reserve, and we used 1.2 million this year, is that the number?
No, it's closer to about 1.6.
1.6. Where does that put the county's reserve going forward? What is that number, and are we comfortable with that number?
Yeah, our overall reserves, let me look at that from when I presented that in August. So year end 17, overall, we had 7.9 months of reserves to expenditures. The state auditor recommends no less than 5 months, so we're sitting very good in that term, and even the use of 1.6 million won't put much of a dent into that, because 1 month of reserves equates to about 3.2 million of total expenditures, so we'll use about a half month of reserve. And a lot of times we underspend our overall budget in a year, so I'm estimating that budgeted portion of 1.6, we won't use that whole amount because we'll underspend in other areas.
All right, so you talked in terms of months, and then you gave me a formula, but what is the county's
The total
reserve
dollar,
balance?
year end 17, and this is unrestricted. It is about 25 million.
And then in restricted funds?
That I don't have, but restricted funds are can only be used based on how they're dictated in state statute or by grant or federal law. So those funds we hold for those specific purposes. It's the unrestricted portion that we do infrastructure projects with and meet other needs with.
So, unlike our friends at the state, when we have a $25 million surplus and they have a $1.5 billion surplus, we won't spend ours all in a year, right?
I hope not.
I mean, we won't.
No.
But it's good to have that cushion.
It helps with infrastructure projects. Sometimes when we get federal funding, we have to front the money. So it's good to have extra funds like that. And cash reserves also helps with our bond rating, which we just issued debt in 2018 as well.
Any other questions from commissioners?
I just have a rough answer. I looked online, they were projecting our 2009 population at 32,000. And the most current information I could find was 2017, which was just short of 34,000. So that's approximate numbers for you. And I think if everything is consistent with what we've seen up to this point, our trajectory continues to grow. We're not going by. A lot of the smaller counties around us are getting smaller in population. Nicollet County and Blue Earth County seem to be kind of the growth area. And Nicollet County also, from my experience, has continued to have one of the lowest unemployment rates of all of the counties in the region.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Out-of-home placement, which category does that fit into for expenditures?
Well, there's several individual accounts. It's in human services.
Oh, it is, okay.
I mentioned that for social services, the total tax levy there is 4.2 million. We have 1.6 million of that is for out-of-home placement costs. Or excuse me, 1.5 million is for out-of-home placement.
Any other comments or questions to our budget meeting here this evening? I forgot to mention, newly elected Commissioner Terry Morrow is with us as well. So he will be replacing retiring Commissioner Jim Stenson in January. So any other comments or questions to our proposed 2019 budget and levy? I want to thank you for coming this evening and being here at the county board meeting. We appreciate your attendance. The final budget will be set at the regular county board meeting on Tuesday, December 18th, 2018, here in the county boardroom. If there are no other comments, we are adjourned. Thank you.